We never really spoke specifically on Finals MVP, which shout out to Jalen Brunson because he was the winner of that. So we're just going to get into it, Mace. From everything we've seen, right? Does this make Jalen Brunson the league's best point guard right now?
Yeah, I mean that's common sense. That goes without saying. It doesn't matter what SGA did, his sneakers, the chrome hard on the bottom of those sneakers. SGA is right there, but with this performance that I seen in the closeout season, it just what have you done for me lately? You know where we're from. We're from New York. Everything can change. It could change tonight. You know what I'm saying? Not tomorrow. Tonight it could change. The performance that Jalen Brunson gave in that closeout game, his resilience when they was bumping him off the picks, they was trying to throw him to the floor. One time they knocked him into the scoreboard. It's like you're not gonna rattle him. And he just comes from a basketball pedigree. Sometimes the dad wants you to do well, but the mother wants you to be a violinist. You know what I'm saying? But it seemed like his mother breathes basketball, his dad breathes basketball. He's just basketball through and through. He doesn't want to do anything else. He doesn't like anything. It looks like he doesn't like anything else. And it's gonna be hard for a person that eat, sleep, and breathe basketball to not be the best player on the floor. So right now, I know before this playoffs, we had different people up there with him. He was right there with Cade. He was right there with SGA, but now he surpassed him with this performance. And you always got to say the best player is the one who got MVP. There's no way around that. How could I not be the best player? There's no way y'all have a conversation with me or Killer about I'm not the best player and I'm standing here with the trophy. So whether Killer won the championship up in Rucker at 15, if he's standing there with the MVP, he's the best player now. I don't want to hear how old everybody is and what you did before. We're going with right now. Right now, Jalen Brunson is the best player in the league.
I seen niggas get the MVP. It wasn't the best player. Andre Iguodala got an MVP one year because he got it. LeBron James good. So they was like, give it to Iguodala. He's pretty good on defense. So it's scenarios. But listen, I gotta agree with Mace. It's hard to argue. If you sitting there saying, if you start on the team, right, you say you want a point guard, how you don't say you don't want Jalen Brunson? And like I said, everybody who dissed Jalen Brunson is kicking themselves in the ass because Jalen Brunson, and the reason I love the nigga Jalen Brunson is because he didn't say nothing. Everybody talk shit. Even even me and Mace, to be totally honest with you. We gonna see what he can do against Harden and Donovan Mitchell. Is different when it's more. And then you see all these sound bites of all these other sports analysts when Jalen Brunson got to the Knicks. Oh, he's too small. Becky Hammon, the coach. Oh, I don't know. She told Big Perk on ESPN, nah, he can't get it done. You need a 1A player. You don't have a 1A player on the Knicks. And then Perk was like, yo, they got a 1A player. But I ain't gonna lie, Kendrick Perkins been pumping Jalen Brunson pause for the last year and a half. And he's the only one I've seen very consistent saying that he can win a championship. He says only been gonna be 3 people, small guards, to win championships. It would be Jalen Brunson, Isaiah Thomas, and Steph Curry. I don't even put Steph Curry in that equation. First of all, Steph Curry's 6'3". Even though he's a smaller guard. Jalen Brunson 6'2", Isaiah Thomas 6'1". But Steph Curry's not even a traditional point guard. He doesn't even bring the ball up. He plays off the ball a lot. So it's really just Jalen Brunson and Isaiah Thomas.
Why not Kyrie?
We're talking about 1 championships.
Kyrie.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, that's a good point, too. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But I think that what Kendrick Perkins was trying to say, the best player, and that's arguable too if you want to pick him over LeBron.
Because Kyrie hit the shot to win it.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
We gotta put Kyrie there.
Yeah.
Kyrie hit that.
That's a great point.
At 3 to win it.
That's a good point as well. Absolutely. But I guess that's the argument. But yeah, I didn't even think about great assessment as well. That's why I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, I forgot the nigga actually won with LeBron. So absolutely, that's a great point, Mace. So yeah, you got Kyrie, you got Isaiah Thomas, and now you got Jalen Brunson. But I gotta agree with it right now. I'm not taking a point guard over Jalen Brunson. This is what I'm saying. This is exactly why I wanted to have Jalen Brunson go against SGA. So this wouldn't even be a conversation. Because at the end of the day, you can't get, I'm not mad at somebody gonna say SGA neither. Listen, I said SGA too, and I might tomorrow say SGA. You know, we in the moment right now for 45-point victory in the closeout.
Crazy.
It may be 3 weeks and I'll be like, nah, I'm bugging 6'7". Nigga smooth as ice. Didn't have no help really. Chet checked out. Chet checked out before the fucking series started with motherfucking San Antonio. AJ Mitchell, he was hurt, which is their second lead scorer. We talk about J-Dub, took them niggas to 7 games basically by himself. You know, so what help did he really have? Dork is just there for defense. He be football player and shit. Shout out to Dork. I think he's a great player as well. But they did a lot. Fingernail Man did something one game with them niggas. What's the nigga name?
Game.
Yeah, you know that nigga name my heart.
It's like, yo.
Nigga. Yeah, he played a couple good games, you know what I'm saying? But at the end of the day, that's why I really want to see that that Oklahoma City SGA against the Knicks, because it wouldn't have been no argument after it. It wouldn't have even been.
Oh yeah.
It wouldn't have been nothing because, like I said,
right now we still want to see it.
Yeah, because
we want to definitely see it now.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's hard to argue. We 48 hours away from a 45-point victory.
Yeah.
But I don't know next month. Next month I'll be like, nah, niggas is wildin'. SGA is nice. So if them two players would have played against each other, that would have been sensational because it wouldn't have been an argument.
About his family influence is especially interesting. Sometimes a father wants his son to become an athlete, while the mother imagines an entirely different future. Maybe she pictures a musician. Maybe she wants him to follow a path far away from the physical punishment of professional sports. According to this account, that wasn't Brunson's story. Both sides of his family, they argue, were pushing him toward the same destination. Basketball wasn't just another hobby competing for his attention. It became the pursuit, the obsession, the thing that consumed him. And when someone spends practically an entire lifetime eating, sleeping, and breathing one craft without allowing competing interests to pull them away, the outcome can start feeling almost inevitable. It becomes extremely difficult, almost like simple math, for that person not to separate themselves when everyone else is dividing their attention and he's completely locked in. Then the conversation moves into something even more intriguing, because now this isn't only about talent. We're watching the machinery of legacy being built right in front of us. Before this playoff run, Brunson's name was regularly mentioned alongside other point guards, including Cade Cunningham and SGA, in the broader argument about which floor general would define the next generation. He was absolutely part of that conversation. He was viewed as comparable, someone worth mentioning, even if he wasn't always the first name people chose. But one explosive postseason performance can completely rearrange those rankings overnight. And the argument being made here is almost brutally straightforward, yet surprisingly difficult to knock down. The best player is the player whose hardware gives the argument something tangible to stand on, not potential, not projections, not what might happen someday. Holding the trophy changes the conversation because it's difficult to tell someone they're not the best when they're the one standing there with the actual prize. That philosophy gets pushed even further with a personal and almost confrontational example. Imagine a street ball legend who, at only 15 years old, wins a championship at Rucker Park and walks away with the MVP trophy. Whatever anyone thinks about his age, experience, or the rest of his resume, in that exact moment, with that specific trophy in his hands, he's the best player there. It's a present tense way of thinking. It refuses to let history or reputation overpower what is happening right now. Jalen Brunson, right now and during this exact stretch of basketball, is being labeled the league's best point guard, not because of everything he's accumulated over an entire decade, but because of what he just delivered under pressure on basketball's biggest stage. Then the conversation takes an important turn. It starts questioning its own certainty with a little bit of self-awareness. Because winning an MVP or another major individual award doesn't automatically mean you are unquestionably the best player. Awards are decided by voters, and voters can be influenced by narratives, matchups, and storylines that don't always perfectly represent what happened between the lines. The example they bring up makes that point especially clear. A defensive specialist once won Finals MVP largely because of the job he did defending LeBron James, not because he was statistically or completely the best player on the floor, but because that defensive matchup created a compelling story that voters decided to reward. It's a useful reminder that trophies, while important, can sometimes tell a slightly distorted version of the story. Still, after admitting that limitation, the hosts arrive at the same conclusion. If you were building a team from nothing today and were told to select one point guard, could you honestly make a stronger case for somebody other than Jalen Brunson right now? That qualification doesn't destroy their argument. If anything, it makes the conclusion feel more honest. And this is where personal accountability enters the discussion in a way that makes the entire debate even more compelling. The hosts openly acknowledge that they got Brunson wrong. When they previously discussed how the Knicks might perform against elite competition, against players like Harden or Donovan Mitchell, there was plenty of skepticism. Beating weaker opponents is one thing. Going against legitimate stars, surviving that level of pressure, and coming out on top is something completely different. And the bigger point is that this skepticism wasn't exclusive to these hosts. It was everywhere. National media personalities questioned whether Brunson was simply too undersized to be the true number one option on a championship-level team. One moment in particular keeps coming back. A former coach turned television analyst flat out argued that the Knicks didn't have a true 1A, which basically meant he didn't believe Brunson could become the unquestioned best player on a team capable of winning it all. Another analyst had a much simpler response at the time, and looking back now, it almost sounds prophetic. Yes, they do have a 1A player. They had one the entire time. The problem was that people simply weren't ready to see it. That leads into an important moment of giving credit where credit is actually deserved. One analyst in particular is praised for standing behind Brunson consistently for more than a year, long before this playoff run finally turned that belief into something undeniable. And that distinction matters in sports media. Anybody can jump onto the bandwagon once the championship is already sitting in the trophy case. It takes real conviction to make the argument before the evidence becomes overwhelming, especially when the doubters are louder than the believers. That same analyst apparently follows a very specific historical standard when evaluating smaller guards and their ability to lead championship teams. The argument is that throughout NBA history, only a limited number of undersized guards have actually won championships while serving as major driving forces. Isaiah Thomas and, with everything happening now, Jalen Brunson immediately enter that discussion, which creates an interesting question about whether Steph Curry should belong in that same category. And honestly, this is a fascinating basketball debate rather than just another television talking point. The reasoning for separating Curry from that smaller guard group isn't really about his height, but about the way he plays. Steph Curry, despite being relatively small for an NBA guard, doesn't function as a traditional table-setting, ball-dominant point guard in exactly the same way Brunson or Isaiah Thomas do. He creates enormous damage away from the ball, flying around screens and constantly moving, instead of controlling the ball as the primary initiator on possession after possession. So while Curry may technically be undersized, his responsibilities aren't exactly the same as those carried by a traditional point guard. The job of controlling the offense, absorbing ball pressure, making decisions, and essentially acting as a Swiss Army knife on nearly every possession is a different burden. And that distinction is important because it moves the debate away from something as basic as height and toward role and responsibility. Under this logic, Brunson and Isaiah Thomas are doing something fundamentally different and arguably more demanding than Curry. That doesn't diminish Curry's ridiculous statistical impact or the otherworldly gravity created by his shooting. But then another name suddenly enters the discussion as an important correction: Kyrie Irving. There's a brief moment of uncertainty before the name gets remembered, and honestly, it's one of the most natural moments in the entire conversation, because Kyrie Irving, despite having that smaller guard frame, hit one of the most unforgettable shots in NBA Finals history to help close out a championship. That's not some tiny detail that should be forgotten, because that shot is permanently etched into NBA history. Once Kyrie is brought back into the conversation, it's extremely difficult to argue against putting him in the same lineage of undersized guards who personally changed the outcome of a championship. Now the group becomes much clearer: Isaiah Thomas, Kyrie Irving, and Jalen Brunson. Steph Curry remains in his own separate category because of the unique way he creates offense. What's most interesting about this exchange is that the conversation isn't really driven by statistics. It's about watching a legacy develop in real time, while people admit uncertainty and still take a position. Because immediately after all the praise, all the validation, and all the confidence behind declaring Brunson the best point guard in the league, that's exactly when the real test begins. The question becomes whether that confidence can survive the next opponent, the next matchup, and the next high-pressure night. For the moment, though, the conversation has changed dramatically because Brunson isn't simply being mentioned as one of the contenders anymore. He's being discussed as the standard everyone else has to measure against. Then comes a surprisingly honest and almost self-deprecating admission. This opinion might not survive the test of time. 3 weeks from now, the entire tone could be different. The confidence being expressed today is heavily influenced by the fresh and incredibly vivid memory of a 45-point closeout performance. This isn't some emotionless conclusion created after months of detached statistical analysis. It's a reaction still fueled by the adrenaline of watching a dominant, statement-making performance unfold in a real time. And strangely enough, that honesty makes the argument more convincing rather than less. It's not blind hype, it's an acknowledgement that sports opinions are influenced by recency, emotion, and the electricity that comes from watching greatness happen right in front of you. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that when you're transparent about it. From there, the discussion moves towards something that actually makes the Brunson argument stronger instead of weaker: context. Because greatness in comfortable circumstances is one thing, while greatness when everything is falling apart around you is something completely different. And the circumstances surrounding this playoff run were anything but comfortable. One crucial teammate is specifically brought up as essentially becoming unavailable before the difficult series against San Antonio even got underway. That injury took away an important piece of the roster's depth and two-way production. Then another rotation player becomes part of the story. He was described as the team's second leading scorer, suffered an injury of his own, and forced the entire group to completely rethink its identity without one of its biggest scoring weapons. In the middle of all that adversity, another teammate receives serious credit. This was a player who, for much of the time, helped carry the team through a brutal 7-game series against a difficult opponent through sheer determination and non-stop effort, doing whatever the situation required, possession after possession and game after game. There's also appreciation for a big man whose greatest value comes from defense and physical toughness. He's described almost affectionately as having a football player's mentality. He's the kind of player willing to handle the ugly work that doesn't always show up dramatically in the box score, but absolutely shows up when you're trying to win basketball games. Beyond him, another role player gets a quick shout-out for producing one particularly memorable performance somewhere during the playoff run. His name gets hilariously butchered for a moment during the conversation, which somehow makes the exchange feel even more authentic. This isn't some perfectly rehearsed television segment where every name and statistic has been memorized. It's two people genuinely trying to process what they just watched, occasionally forgetting a name, laughing about the mistake, and moving forward. Because the larger argument matters more than having a flawless memory. And eventually, all of that context circles back to the central point, with key pieces weakened and the roster entering the championship chase much thinner than it was supposed to be. One player still found a way to become the best player on the floor when the moment demanded it most. That's a massive accomplishment. This wasn't simply a stacked roster creating easy opportunities and allowing him to pile up effortless production. This was one player dragging an incomplete team through an extraordinary combination of individual brilliance, toughness, and mental strength. Then, as the conversation reaches its final stretch, one fascinating hypothetical suddenly changes the entire argument. What if the matchup everyone actually wanted had happened, with Jalen Brunson's team facing Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's team in a real playoff series? The argument is that if those two teams had met, there might not even be a debate left to have today. It wouldn't still be theoretical. It would have been settled through actual results, direct competition, and watching two of the league's most compelling guards go possession for possession, with everything on the line. Instead, the question remains unanswered, fueled by separate playoff journeys rather than a direct showdown. That means the argument, no matter how strongly people feel about it right now, is still partly subjective instead of completely proven. And honestly, that's the emotional heart of this entire discussion. This isn't some detached analysis coming from a perfectly neutral position. It's an immediate reaction from people who just witnessed something special and are trying to process its significance while the adrenaline is still fresh. There's something refreshing about admitting that the belief that Jalen Brunson is currently the league's best point guard is still a moving target. Maybe it survives another round of scrutiny, maybe it loses some strength once time passes, emotions settle, and everyone gets a more detached perspective. But right now, only 48 hours removed from a dominant closeout performance that pushed a franchise forward despite injuries, adversity, and relentless physical punishment, the argument isn't really about creating a permanent historical ranking. It's about recognizing a peak moment while you're actually watching it happen. It's about refusing to let outdated preseason expectations or reputation-based rankings overpower what is clearly happening in front of everyone. And that's ultimately the most powerful idea running through this entire debate. This isn't really a traditional numbers versus numbers or resume versus resume basketball argument. It's a philosophical question about how we should evaluate greatness while it's unfolding. Do we really need years of accumulated evidence before we can call someone the best at what they do? Or can we recognize an undeniable peak immediately while still admitting that our opinion could change later? The hosts clearly choose the second option. They choose to live in the present, trust what they just witnessed, give Brunson credit that may have been overdue, and refuse to let comfortable old narratives dictate today's reality. And maybe that's the fairest way to understand Jalen Brunson's rise. He wasn't handed an easy path. He wasn't viewed as the prospect with the highest theoretical ceiling, the most naturally gifted athlete, or the media's favorite name before the season even started. Whatever he built through relentless preparation, remarkable mental toughness, and a refusal to let outside criticism control what he privately believed he could become. Every collision coming off a screen, every attempt to physically wear him down, and every national debate about whether his size would eventually limit his ceiling became fuel instead of a reason to back down. And when the biggest moment of his career arrived, none of that resistance could stop him. He absorbed the punishment, lived through the skepticism, and delivered a performance powerful enough to quiet, at least for now, one of the loudest debates in the NBA. Who is actually the best point guard in basketball right now? There's another part of this discussion that deserves attention because the issue of being undersized keeps returning throughout the story like a villain that refuses to disappear. Height has always been used as an easy shortcut for measuring dominance in basketball. Taller players are supposedly better equipped for rim protection, longer defensive reach, and physical advantages that naturally translate into winning. And every undersized guard trying to become the centerpiece of a championship team has had to challenge that assumption before even getting the chance to prove himself on the court. Isaiah Thomas dealt with that expectation. Kyrie Irving, despite all of his individual brilliance, carried that same question throughout his career. And Jalen Brunson has spent his entire rise dealing with that exact skepticism. The belief is that being a certain height automatically prevents someone from becoming a legitimate number one option, regardless of skill, toughness, intelligence, or how many winning plays they make. What makes this moment hit differently is that the doubt wasn't some vague theory floating around. It had a specific moment attached to it. A respected basketball media figure openly stated that this roster didn't have a 1A player, meaning there was no unquestioned leader capable of carrying a championship run. That's not a quiet concern buried somewhere in the background. That's a public dismissal. And from a storytelling standpoint, there's something incredibly satisfying about seeing a player answer that kind of dismissal, not with a statement, not with a social media response, and not with a press conference, but with a 45-point demolition in a closeout game that appeared to settle the argument. It's also important to look at the relationship between the two hosts throughout this breakdown. Their movement from disagreement toward agreement shows just how quickly perception can change when new evidence enters the conversation. At one point, the skepticism starts creeping back into the discussion. It's reasonable and measured skepticism, acknowledging that we still haven't seen Brunson face this exact level of pressure against players like Harden or Donovan Mitchell. Those are proven stars with championship experience and elite shot creation ability. And that challenge isn't brushed aside or minimized. It's acknowledged as a legitimate unknown, another question that still needs an answer. And that's precisely what makes the discussion feel genuine instead of scripted. There's room for uncertainty, even while they maintain strong convictions. Great sports commentary shouldn't manufacture certainty when the evidence isn't complete. It should make the strongest argument the available evidence allows, while being honest about the questions that remain unanswered. Then, there's another layer that reaches far beyond basketball itself. It's the emotional, almost spiritual feeling of being publicly doubted and then receiving your answer in real time on the biggest stage possible. Because this isn't simply a story about a talented point guard doing his job. It's about perseverance in the face of repeated and highly visible skepticism. Analysts questioned his size, former coaches turned commentators questioned whether he could truly lead, rival fan bases and media personalities built entire narratives around the idea that this team, with this particular point guard, simply didn't have enough to survive elite competition. And every one of those narratives required an answer that interviews or social media posts could never provide. It required sustained production. It required taking the punishment, getting knocked into a scoreboard by defenders determined to disrupt his rhythm, and responding not with anger or retaliation, but with the kind of controlled dominance that can make an argument feel settled rather than merely silenced for a moment. That earlier conversation about family and pedigree deserves another look because it frames Brunson's rise as something far bigger than a sudden breakout. It suggests that what we're seeing now could be the natural result of an entire life structured around one obsession. When a household is centered around basketball from the earliest possible age, without competing hobbies, divided attention, or alternative paths quietly pulling the player in another direction, that athlete develops a completely different connection to the game than someone who discovers it later or has to balance it against several other interests. At that point, basketball stops feeling like simply a career and starts becoming part of the person's identity. And when that identity is built so deeply and so early, it can produce competitors who don't panic when playoff pressure rises, don't fold when opponents get physical, and don't view adversity as some unusual crisis, but simply as another chapter in a lifetime of preparation. What this entire exchange ultimately shows, beyond the rankings and the argument over point guard hierarchy, is a raw look at sports fandom changing in real time. Two people are openly admitting that just months ago they questioned whether this exact outcome was even possible. Now they're sitting there convinced, while still leaving themselves enough room to admit that their long-term judgment could change, depending on what happens next. That balance between confidence and humility might actually be the most authentic representation of what truly caring about sports looks like. Nobody who watched that closeout game only 48 hours earlier can fully understand its place in basketball history yet. What they can understand is the immediate reality of watching a player take punishment, refuse to break, and walk away with a trophy in a case that, at least right now, is extremely difficult to challenge. And maybe that's the biggest takeaway from this entire closeout performance. It's not about creating some permanent ranking and engraving it into stone, but recognizing how quickly the basketball landscape can completely shift after one extraordinary stretch of games. Careers unfold over years, rankings change, new challenges arrive every season, and today's strongest belief can easily become tomorrow's forgotten footnote. But every once in a while, a performance comes along that forces everyone, from the media and opponents to even the most committed doubters, to stop and question what they thought they already knew. That's what happened here. This wasn't some quiet adjustment on an imaginary leaderboard, but a loud, physical, undeniable statement delivered under playoff pressure in front of a fan base and an entire city that had been waiting a long time to feel this confidence in someone again. Whether that judgment survives 3 weeks, 3 months, or an entire career is impossible to know right now. Sports opinions are constantly changing, shaped by recency, emotion, and the electricity of watching something extraordinary happen live. But in this exact moment, still fresh from a dominant closeout performance, the conclusion being presented is direct, confident, and for now, incredibly difficult to argue against. Jalen Brunson didn't simply finish a playoff series. He answered a question that had been building around him for years, and he answered it in the one language that eventually matters most in professional sports. Not with speeches, not with potential, and not with promises, but with production. When everything was on the line and the entire basketball world was watching, he delivered.